Research finds that women consider men with a high body count, a high number of previous sexual partners, attractive, at least if he shows commitment to a long-term monogamous relationship, whereas men commonly view women with a very high body count as very undesirable. So generally a high body count is seen as attractive for men but unattractive for women. The explanation for this sex difference from evolutionary psychology is that for men, past promiscuity promises future promiscuity, and men don't want to be cucked. If a man is in a relationship with a woman, the woman cheats, the woman gets pregnant, and the woman gives birth to a child of the other man, and you're the one raising it, then you are investing all of your resources into someone else's child. So you may not produce offspring and your genes will not survive. Being cucked is evolutionary very, very bad. Since it's women that give birth, even in 2025, women don't have this problem. A history of promiscuity for a man traditionally meant that the man had high status. Because it's traditionally men that pursue women, not the other way around. A man that has had access to a lot of sexual partners was highly desired. It meant that he could have that many partners. And as long as that man is now committed to monogamy, this should, in theory, be a good deal. Mind you, this is the evolutionary explanation, not how I personally view the world or what my opinion is of how the world should be. Speaking of how the world is, we fortunately don't live in ancestral times anymore. So, how relevant are men's concerns with body count? Body count is still very high on the list of things that concern men in a potential partner. But in modern society, does it really matter if a woman has a high body count? Men are evolutionarily programmed to dislike promiscuity. However, that doesn't mean this is rational. In an age of increasing promiscuity and birth control, what does it really matter if a woman has had a lot of sexual partners? Especially if you as a guy have had a lot of partners, then surely it should be okay if the woman has done the same. Well, statistically, it is good to know that the number of lifetime sexual partners someone has had is a pretty strong predictor of future infidelity. Scientific research has investigated what the strongest predictors of infidelity are, and body count is highly significant. For every additional lifetime sexual partner, the odds that a woman engages in infidelity in any given year increase by 7 to 13%. The 7% comes from data that women anonymously enter their information to a computer, and the 13% comes from face-to-face interviews. The women in this study acknowledged that it was easier to be honest and open about their number of lifetime sexual partners and how often they had cheated on their partners to a computer than in a face-to-face interview. Concretely, women admitted to over 7 times more infidelity in an anonymous computer interview than in a face-to-face interview. It's important to note that the 7 to 13% higher odds are an odds ratio, not absolute probabilities. To calculate the absolute probabilities, we need to know what the base rate is. In research, about 20 to 33% of women engage in infidelity in any given relationship. For men, that number is considerably higher, ranging between 20 and 50%. Assuming a 25% base rate probability of infidelity, and assuming that the body count number you get is the one you would get from a face-to-face interview, not necessarily the true number, which means there are 13% higher odds of infidelity for every partner your partner has had, this translates into a 2.4% higher absolute probability of infidelity of your current partner. Statistically, on average in research at least. This means that if a woman has a body count of 10, the absolute probability of infidelity increases by 24%, again on average in research. This would mean that a body count of 20 means 48%. When you get to a body count of 21, the increased chance of infidelity increases to over 50%. And when you get to a body count of over 41, things start to look pretty dire statistically because the expected value of infidelity is over 1, meaning that is the base rate that you should expect. Now, before you use this information to judge anybody, it's important to note why past promiscuity predicts future infidelity. Psychologists have identified 3 main reasons why this is the case. The first is sexual interest. Some people just have more sexual interest, they have higher libido, they like sex more than other people. And in a sexual relationship, this is generally a good thing and a positive predictor of relationship and at least sexual quality. Almost all traits in a partner have trade-offs. If you have a partner with high libido, that is probably good for your sex life, but it's not a good statistical indicator for the chance of infidelity. The second explanation for why body count predicts infidelity is novelty seeking. Some people are more open-minded than others, they like adventure more. Unfortunately, that includes the adventure of cheating. Both novelty seeking and sexual interest are generally desirable traits in a partner, but they come with the trade-off of higher expected infidelity. The third explanation for the finding that someone's lifetime sexual partners predict their likelihood of cheating is availability. Availability is arguably the factor that merits the most consideration because the number of partners that someone has had is very strongly influenced by the number of partners that they could get. If you're honest with yourself, would you have had more sexual partners if you had easy access to more sexual partners? For a lot of people, the answer is yes. This is especially true for men because it's usually men doing the pursuing, and you can think of women as the gatekeepers of sex. Women decide whether sex takes place or not, and men try to get sex. That's how it usually works, even in our current society. The result is that how many sexual partners someone has had should always be viewed relative to how many sexual partners they had access to. If someone has never had sex with anybody else, you might think that's very virtuous, but in reality it could just mean that they never had access to anybody. They just couldn't find any partners. Whereas a very beautiful woman with many suitors may have only said yes to 1 in 1,000 of them and still ended up with a considerably higher body count than the average woman. And for this highly desirable woman, body count may not have the same predictive power of infidelity. While we don't have hard data on this, I would think that the percentage of men she said yes to is probably a better indicator than simply the total absolute body count. I hope that helps you contextualize the relevance of body count, and by giving you access to the scientific information, you can make up your own opinions. My intent is not to make any value judgments, simply to provide you with the available scientific information so that you can form your own opinion. If you like this type of evidence-based content, I'd be honored if you would like and subscribe.